This is another one of these movies. Definitely watch it if you're going to watch this episode.
Welcome back to Foreplay. We are still in our creepy deep cuts, scary deep cuts arc. Sorry, scary deep cuts. I already messed up on the name of it. It's our last film. It will be Kill List from 2011. But before we get into Kill List, we are here to announce our new arc, which we have hinted at previously, in honor of the possibly questionable quality of Gladiator 2 coming out. I've heard some interesting rumors, such as there are people reading newspapers in ancient Rome when the printing press wasn't invented for 1,000 years.
I mean, look, we all saw the wristwatch in in Spartacus. There's a long, proud tradition of anachronisms in Sword and Sandals movies, so it's fine.
By the way, without making it too much of a black pill, that's actually a real thing that teachers now claim. By the way, is they say that when they talk to their students, that students do things like write papers, and then they'll tell the student like, "But why did you have them like using a cell phone in 1940?" And they'll be like, "Oh right, I didn't think about that." So that better not be real. By the way, if that's like a real thing, like I can't handle it.
Dude, I've told you, obviously, as an adjunct professor, I have to mark papers when I do a semester, and I have seen kids these days put emojis in the middle of a sentence.
Oh, no!
Yeah. Listen, it's all true. But I'm trying. I'm holding back.
You're
the
reforming
tide,
them. God bless you.
Yeah.
So anyway, we are going to be doing the Sword and Sandals arc, and this is going to contain some of the really, really epic movies that are actually, by today's standard, kind of unimaginable in scope because the size of the sets, the tens, in some cases, like tens of thousands of extras that they had to recruit in order to be on these films. If you haven't seen some of these movies from the 50s and 60s, your mind is going to be blown by how many people and horses they can put into a movie. And the fact that, the chariot sequence in Ben-Hur exists is pretty amazing. So we are going to be starting with that film, Ben-Hur, which of course is a remake of a previous Ben-Hur, but the famous one is from the 50s, right? So the Charlton Heston Ben-Hur. And then we will be doing our first Kubrick film. It's kind of surprising that we got to, 50-some movies without actually getting into a single Kubrick film yet. That'll be Spartacus. Then we'll be doing a more contemporary film, which is the director's cut of Troy. So that's going to be the really long 3-hour version of Troy. Troy is a movie that I do think is kind of underrated, but people are starting to come around on it these days. Pretty enjoyable film. And then we will be ending with Gladiator 1/Gladiator 2. So we will go to the movie theater, watch Gladiator 2, and kind of do them both at the same time, do a comparison of the Ridley Scott movies. So there you guys go. That's our Sword and Sandals arc, and that'll be coming up next.
By the way, I hope everyone's enjoying the little Easter egg spoilers that we've put into this arc, which is the scary deep cuts one. Because what we've done is we've created horror movie aesthetic around the releases. Like, wait a minute, I thought wasn't that already released, that video? No. Exactly. What video? There never was a video. Then it comes out a few days later, people are guessing, I thought I saw this one. No, but is my memory fragmented? Is it, is the story being told? Is it found footage? What's going on with the clips? Do they have does the footage have a life of its own where it calls out and summons the people who created it, and then they come and destroy it? So I don't know. At this point in time, I feel like I'm part of like a horror movie arc, just trying to get these bloody episodes out.
If you don't share the links to the videos, obviously within a week you will die in a video game in Minecraft. So, but
it's ridiculous, isn't it? Is this one we're getting banged at the moment, guys? Every 2 days.
So the real horror is copyright law.
The problem is, so here's the problem and why the episodes have been getting taken down for you guys who don't know. So especially because we've been dealing with smaller films on this arc, the big studios, they find that shit instantly and they just start limiting it. So it's a lot easier to tell when we need to trim one of the segments that Adanion, our editor, uses, because it'll instantly hit it before it comes out. He goes through a cut, hopefully not too many cuts. Sometimes with certain studios, Warner Brothers, we go through a lot of cuts, and he hates his life. But sometimes, guys, when we're dealing with these smaller production companies or the people who hold this distribution rights, they're not so fast at finding it. So sometimes that video can sit there, of course, privated where they can look at it and see if they want to stop it from going out for like a week. And then what happens is they decide a week after we've released it that now is the time they want to look at it and then start to, file disputes.
Which of course, Monte is it's actually pretty famous in the modern day. Like loads of those video essay channels came from doing videos about films. Like how did they not get hit? But we get hit for like 5 seconds of
back then, obviously, it wasn't all automated like it is now. That's the thing. What you used to do back in the day, if you wanted to get around it when they first brought automation, is you reverse the clips, flip them upside down, shrink them. You play the audio slightly sped up ever so slightly, little things like this to get around the. Now it's just fucking too good, and unfortunately, even though it's totally fair use, it's being used for the purposes of education and critique. It's not a replacement for the original work in any way. All of that stuff. YouTube's just a nightmare for this, brother. It's
I also think that we probably could win the fair use appeal, but the problem is that they have to answer within 30 days, otherwise it just goes away.
Days.
So our video just is gone for 30 days at that point. So it's just faster to just it's just faster in the end to just re-edit the stuff. So if you guys missed it, we haven't had, as of our recording of this, we haven't had any issues with Gonjiam yet, but Cure and Session 9 have had to be re-uploaded. So we're working on that, guys. Sorry about that. It's very annoying for everybody, mostly for our editor, I would imagine. But yeah, that's what's been going on with those. So any thoughts on the Sword and Sandals arc? Can you hype it up a little bit?
For me, I mean, look, I grew up with all of those movies, and as I told you guys when we were discussing it backstage, so to speak, obviously one of the things we used to do to get amped up for a night of drinking, and certainly not male testosterone violence, was we would put Gladiator on VHS, which we had. It might even have been a pirate copy, right? But when I was at uni, we would just watch that opening scene with the German battle and that guy throwing out the severed head at the start. We're like, "Good, and that was how we would amp ourselves up for a night of heavy drinking. So I am very savvy with Gladiator, and I always felt, I was born out of time. I kind of feel like I'd have been a lot more comfortable swinging a sword around a medieval battlefield rather than having to negotiate the complexities of an ever-changing digital landscape.
See, that's what people always make the mistake, though. You're doing that thing like when the communist imagine what he'd do in the utopia. You're doing that thing where you get to pick your role. You'd just be in a salt mine somewhere. You know what I mean? Like you'd be
like that. No, but it's the thing. Would I? Do you have to go to the salt mine? How can they make you go to the salt mine? How can probably a Roman centurion just runs a sword through me for refusing to go to the salt mine, which kind of that does suck. But
and also, you're making it sound again like you could be the Roman Empire. I think you'd just be one of those like fucking Gaelic people around Wales. I was like, oh, but no, your nonsense language. And they just, you said, they just instantly run the sword through. You can go, right, got rid of that weird fucking local. Now let's take over this joint. I mean, you're like, no, please take me the belt. What is he saying? It's devilry.
I'd at least get one battle in. Surely.
Okay.
Just let me have one, Duncan, for fuck's sake. Let me die on a battlefield. But anyway, look, obviously Sword and Sandals is wicked. Love all that stuff. And I think the movies we've chosen, obviously, because it's our first go around with this arc, I think we've picked the ones that people identify as classics. Now, I'll add the caveat. I think Gladiator 2 is going to be a fucking disaster.
I think it's going to be terrible, but
I do want to just put that out there, but we will find out. I mean, the first one is, about as close to a modern classic as you can sort of get, I think so.
Yeah, it's great. Also, I'll hype up Troy a little bit here, because I think one of the things that when I said people are coming around on Troy, because Troy is from 2004, so it's like 50 years later than some of these other films that we're talking about, right?
That's the one for me that I'm most interested in, because I haven't watched that for a long period of time, and I remember being underwhelmed with it.
So there are a couple things about Troy to hype you up. First off, the cast is actually incredible to that movie. It has aged extremely well.
Yep.
Like everybody knew Brad Pitt in the early 2000s, but Eric Bana's in there. I mean, Orlando Bloom, he's whatever, but he's actually well cast as Paris for what it's worth. Brian Cox, who people now know from Succession, the HBO show. Sean Bean as Odysseus. Like, that's actually a banger casting pretty early in his career. Brendan Gleeson, Peter O'Toole in one of his last roles, right? So the casting is actually extremely good in that movie. And I will say it has some of my favorite fight sequences. The fight choreography in that is incredibly unique. And they did, I think, an excellent job of portraying Achilles as the best warrior in the world. So it's fun. It's a fun watch.
Yeah.
No, I would say Troy was one of the ones I've recommended in the past. I do think it's another film where I've only ever heard people act like it's shit. But every time I've watched it, I think it's good. It's not on the level of like Gladiator. I agree, Richard. That is actually for me like almost a 10 out of 10 film. Like I've rewatched that a million times. But I think Troy's pretty good. And definitely like for some of the things Monty's saying, like I think Eric Banner's performance as Hector is mega. As you say, Peter O'Toole, both the people, Brendan Gleeson and Brian Cox are mega in it. Sean Bean. Like basically, I even agree on the Orlando Bloom. I actually think that guy's a terrible actor, but that's like one of the rare roles that he's actually fairly well cast in because he is just sort of like a fucking mimbo, isn't he? So that's kind of the role he plays. So I actually think it's underrated. I also think, by the way, just as a quick aside, one thing they actually did a quite smart job within that film is, unlike almost every other film like that, if you made it in the modern day, they intentionally actually treated that film, Monty, like it was a secular film. They don't actually show anything with the gods in it.
Yeah.
Like they infer that they're doing, libations to them and rituals, but they don't ever do what you would do in the modern day, which is like a Clash of the Titans type thing where you'd have like the gods interfere. I actually think it makes the film more of a human story. It's actually very well told, and just like the Iliad, it ends on the perfect note. It's got a very somber note to how it ends.
It is an interesting take on the Iliad because obviously in the Iliad the gods are major characters to the degree that they are actually like holding Achilles back from murdering people by his hair. Like Athena's like grabbing him by the hair and shit.
To guide the arrow into fucking Achilles' heel, etc. All that shit. Yeah.
So it could be really corny. It could be really corny.
And I'll also say though, here's the sad thing, Monty. I'll already prepare you for a massive bomber. I've made this point on past episodes, but if there is one thing for quality of life, I wish I could go back and Men in Black delete from my memory, is I wish I'd never seen a single Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode because they ruined about 1 billion movies and I have a really good memory. So spoiler, when I saw Ben-Hur, Monty, and it got to that scene where he meets fucking Jesus, I just remember that ridiculous one in The Simpsons of Charlton Heston going, "Truly you are the King of Kings." And I remember just thinking like, this has ruined the whole like pathos of this moment for me though, because I've already seen it as a fucked up Simpsons mockery of it. Like, what? Why have I seen that? So it's one of those ones that's always in my brain for that reason. Truly, you are the King of Kings. Like, what? Get the fuck out.
Great stuff. So yeah, we are going to be going through those films. It will be really fun. We haven't done any of the 50s or 60s like Hollywood epics. We haven't done Lawrence of Arabia or any of the like the really, really big movies of that era.
Monty, listen, there's been some films where our fans haven't fucked with us. Listen, it's a bit of an ask to make them watch Lawrence of Arabia, Monty. Like, I like it, but you know what I mean?
It's one of the greatest films of all time.
It's about 3 hours long. Like, there's going to be some really bad reviews.
They do it for Lord of the Rings.
Video.
I like how you're complaining about the 3-hour movie when we have Ben-Hur and the Troy directors cut of Spartacus. They're all long, man.
No, but spoiler, I think fans are going to hate this arc, but it's all good. I don't mind. I hate fans anyway, so don't worry about it. It's all good for me.
All right. Well, let's talk about Kill List then. So, Richard, why did you pick this movie? It was fun. I enjoyed this one.
Quite simply, because for me, I think it's one of the best British movies of the last 20 years. It's maybe even the best, which might seem a bold claim. It's made by a filmmaker called Ben Wheatley. He's a super interesting filmmaker. Obviously, Duncan likes his movies, particularly A Field in England, I understand you're a fan of, which is a very psychedelic, psychological horror, which is literally set in a field in England. It's about witchcraft.
If you like this film, you need to watch that one next because you'll definitely like that one too. It's almost like a sister piece, isn't it? It's got like comparable elements,
Which, if memory serves me correctly, I saw a sort of early screening of A Field in England in the Electric Cinema in Birmingham, which is the oldest still operational cinema in Britain. A lot of question marks about its future at the moment. But anyway, I won't bore you with that. And anyway, so I've always loved this filmmaker. Ben Wheatley just makes interesting films. Like his other movies that you might have seen are Sightseers, which is a dark comedy about a couple that are probably a bit educationally subnormal that just go around in a caravan killing people. There's High Rise, which is the J.G. Ballard adaptation, which again, not a lot of people have seen, even though it's got a fantastic performance by Tom Hiddleston in it.
Pretty famous cast, yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy Irons in there
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
And also, he made the sequel to The Meg, Meg 2. Which has Jason Statham on a fucking one of them speedboat things fighting a giant shark with a samurai sword. And the reason he made that movie was essentially to secure funding for whatever little indie movie he's going to do next. He's also just released, I haven't seen it yet, but it came out
along
this
those
month.
lines, a lot of these films, like this one and filming, it's implied they're very small budget too, right? A lot of it's
they're all
be
tiny
creative
budget
way
movies.
you put the scene and the set. It's all the same actors.
Kill List
stuff,
was
right?
made for about $800,000, which again is fantastic when you consider it. But anyway, he's just released Generation Z, which is a comedy horror about zombies, which has just been released on British TV this month. I don't have high hopes for it because it's basically billed as a zombie comedy with Johnny Vegas in it. I don't know if that's what I needed in my life, but we'll see. But anyway,
there's not even a way to explain that reference to Monte.
Yeah.
Just one of the shittest comedians of all time. Basically, not even vaguely funny, but yeah.
Great. Okay. But yeah, a fat drunk essentially. So, but anyway, so Kill List. What is it about? Obviously, we'll talk about it more at length. But essentially, it's about a soldier, a mercenary specifically for hire, who has been off work for 9 months with psychological issues that he says are manifesting as back pain. They've run out of money. His wife, who is a beautiful harridan in this, is basically pressurizing him to go back to work, i.e. take another contract. And then a shadowy cabal of people hire him and the incredible Michael Smiley, his partner Gal, to go and basically kill a bunch of people off a list, a titular kill list, you might say. And so they have to go around doing these hits one by one. But as they do that, over time, they realize they're embroiled in machinations that they can't quite see. And while that's happening as well, Neil Maskell, the lead, his mind starts to slowly unravel. And it has a pretty shocking ending. Now, I'll just say this right out the gate. This is another one of these movies. Definitely watch it if you're going to watch this episode. Most of what we're going to talk about will be incomprehensible if you don't anyway, because it's a very allegorical movie. And that's the other key point I would make going in. People hate this film if they treat it purely literally, as in the story is literal. What I'm watching is happening. But this is a movie that is a metaphor for PTSD. This is a movie about the destruction of the nuclear family. This is a movie about the 2008 financial crisis. This is a movie about how tabloids make certain institutions and individuals heroes in Britain, but that reality never pans out. This is a movie about how the political class, suppress working class people, and particularly people that they use for their own devices, like soldiers. All of this is intermingled into a very complex soup, which also has not just witchcraft going on, not just cults and death cults going on. It's also got like this strange dream logic to everything that happens in it. And and a heavy dollop of Arthurian legend dropped in just as a little bonus. So this is a very complex movie. This is a movie that rewards multiple watchings.
Yes.
I've seen this movie 30 or 40 times, maybe more. I always find new little details. And I'm not just saying that as like some people say that about like, Blair Witch or some garbage. No. This movie, you have to watch this movie 3 or 4 times to really let it sink in. And most people don't. They go at the end, is that it? And then they never watch it again. So anyway, I adore this movie, and I'm super excited to get your guys' thoughts on it.
To me, this is another film a bit like Session 9, where it is a slow burn. But here's the key difference is whereas Session 9 was absolutely about a very specific set of storylines coalescing into like a larger overall meta storyline about like who did the murders and who was the Mary woman and what was going on. And then you were allowed to draw your own conclusion. This film, much like most Ben Wheatley films, has almost no exposition. Like scenes happen, you see things like, as Richard said, by the way, if you rewatch the film a few times, you will actually see he did put loads of clues in the film, but they're not clues as in like you really are supposed to take that and then connect it later. And then the first time you watch it, like essentially those are just clues like Richard says, where it's more like I almost feel like the clues are almost there, almost on a subliminal level. Like you're not really supposed to consciously notice them the first time. They're just supposed to be there to tell you something's a bit off and there's a sense of dread. Because the best thing about this film, much like A Field in England, is not any specific like scene. It's more like the atmosphere it creates. This is a really good film. And another thing, if you've ever seen A Field in England, is this director is mega at using the soundtrack to make the atmosphere. As in, his soundtracks aren't even usually even music. It'll be music, but like... or some like really eerie, like fucking, and that alone, by the way, takes in this film scenes which are just everyday reality of, you know, like a guy with his family or having like a simple, that puts like a strange undertone to it where you can already sense like there's something weird. I agree with Richard, actually. I would say if people watch this thinking it's like a narrative film, they're going to be really disappointed. Whereas if you just experience the dread of it, and especially if you can almost watch it like you would watch like a David Lynch film, where you don't try to understand it because you know some of it's sort of like trying to paint a picture of something else or something's allegorical, like Richard says. If you take it more as an experience than a story, I think you're gonna have a way better time. Because I actually really enjoyed this, but I can totally understand why at the end I think loads of people are going to be like, "But what was that? And then who was that? And wait, so that means this? And why did he do it? But why didn't she just shout to him at the end there, cheer under the bite, say, oh, you missed it?" I'm sorry, you unironically, I don't think like you're trying to watch like, as I say, like a traditional narrative film, but that isn't what this is, unfortunately. So the worst thing is, by the way, guys, you'll never get the answers to that. Like, as Richard's probably going to wax lyrical for half an hour, there's all sorts of theories you can build off it, but none of them. And by the way, I even for this one did try going to watch a couple of interviews with the director. He gives you an out. He doesn't tell you any of this shit either. So there is
Ben
no
Wheatley keeps his cards close to his chest, doesn't he?
There really is
There's a very good reason for that, by the way, Duncan, because as I'll get to, there's a theory, a theory in film that Ben Wheatley might have not plagiarized, but might have borrowed elements from another very popular horror movie, or rather, a rather infamous horror movie that was on the movie circuit at the time. Now, it's just like one of those fan theories because there are very similar plot beats, but we'll talk about that in a moment.
Let me put it this way, along those lines, as an outset, if people want to get the sense, I would say when I wrote them down, obvious influences to this film: The Wicker Man, especially because it's a British film, a Serbian film, maybe alluding to what Richard just said, The Devil Rides Out, obviously the whole thing of them going to the cop thing, and then lastly, the one that maybe is more of a sleeper, Eye to Eye Shot. There's obviously clearly an element of that. I even thought that was one of the most interesting parts, Richard, is the other part that when you're watching it, when you first think, you think you're at least going to get some explanation for like what's going on with this like group. No, that's another thing that I think is really good about this film is even the sense of institutional conspiracy, which is lurking at all times. It's never explained. There's almost a Lovecraftian element to this film where it's like, because you're just like, from the perspective of the main character, he doesn't ever get to understand what's going on, and neither do you. And in some ways, if you do it right, like this film, that's actually more terrifying. Like the fact that no one ever does go, they were just like cultists who did it for this reason, and then it's because you were great. The fact no one ever does that, I think actually makes the film better. This is actually a good example of a film where it retains all of its mystique even at the end. Whereas I actually think the problem with a lot of horror films is even when like the setting's creepy or there's like an interesting angle or a unique theme to it, at the end when they explain it, oftentimes like the famous saying about like, they say like explaining a joke is like dissecting a frog. You kill it. Like it doesn't matter that you might then see the word. You just killed it dead. Like there's no more mysteries, no more mystique. This film has all the mystique. In fact, at the end, I don't even know what happened. I'm actually quite interested to hear what some of the theories are.
Yeah, and I do have to, I'm just going to interject here and say, if you care about spoilers, I am not a person who ever cares about spoilers because for me, I have great suspension of disbelief in the moment, so I won't even remember it. But also, I never care about what happens. The only thing I care about is how it happens and the artistry behind it. So you could spoil any movie, and I would just shrug my shoulders, and that would be it. But if you do care about spoilers, if you are one of those people, you definitely should not listen to this episode if you plan on watching this movie, because it will be a much shittier experience for you. And it is a movie I think is very much worth watching. So like we said in Cure, this is where you want to stop if you're going to watch it, because the spoilers and the twist that happens, much like in Cure, is probably going to be something that will make you sad if you care about spoilers. If you don't,
the rest of the film is a slow burn, so it's just going to really frustrate you if you have a sense of what's coming later. Whereas one of the best things about this film, this is where it also reminded me a little bit of Session 9, is it's one of those ones that goes slowly, and at the end just goes mental in like 20 minutes, which I actually think, by the way, is a really effective way to do these types of films.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it really does shake the shit out of you at the end as well. It's like another reason I think people sometimes bounce off this movie is it is such a slow burn that the end feels really incongruous to like the rest of the movie. But yeah, Monte, you like this one? This was a good pick.
Oh, definitely. I mean, but you guys know I like this stuff. It's the closest to Cure from the other movies that we saw, right? In that there is something very insidious going on. I've mentioned Hereditary a million times in this arc. That probably takes cues from this as well, in terms of the kind of creeping dread and the unraveling of this plot that's going on, and figuring out that the characters were there, previous characters were in scenes for potentially weird reasons, or they were plants from this cult. So I love this kind of stuff. I think it's very, very fun to watch this.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things right out the gate that I love about this movie is just how it shows you one thing when it's really another. And so I remember when this movie first came out, Ben Wheatley was already kind of on my radar. He was being talked up, even though this, I believe, was his first feature film. He was kind of being talked up as like, one to go and watch, because he'd done some short movies and what have you. And it was also put out on Warp, I believe, was one of the production companies for it. And if you're a music fan like me and Duncan, you listen to stuff like Aphex Twin, Warp. But they also produced like the This Is England TV series as well.
Right, okay.
And they did Dead Man's Shoes, which was the Shea Meadows movie. So Warp, and they put out Four Lions by Chris Morris. So Warp didn't just do music; they had a really good movie production thing. And so, but to get into like Warp, you have to be one of those like upcoming avant-garde niche artists. So Ben Wheatley was already very much on my radar, and this movie being put out by Warp was like a stamp of approval for me. So anyway, I thought I was initially getting what it showed me, which is here's Neil Maskell, here's Michael Smiley. It's almost like a buddy cop movie. You've got the lovable Irish rogue who, he just wants to
well cast these two main characters.
Yeah.
Like if you know British culture, like the idea that guy is some sort of London working class guy, he's perfectly on the nose for how the actor plays it. And I agree with you. Michael Smiley is exactly like, I'm sure we've all had like an Irish friend like this. That's like your drinking pal. Like they got like that rough side to them, but they're lovable rogue, like you say. Like, those two characters are so perfectly cast for this role.
Yeah, I mean, and their interplay, really carries the early part of the movie.
The dialogue is really believable as well.
The authenticity of this. So like to give you some context, right? The bit where that, like, I've had those late nights as an adult where you go around with your mate and he's having a domestic and you've got to put the kids to bed because mummy and daddy are shouting, and then you come down, you get arsehole drunk with him, you have a fucking play fight in the fucking garden, and then you go to bed and you see him the next day and you pretend that all that like fucked up, picket fence nightmare catharsis never happened, right? That's like adult life for people that haven't really adjusted to what adult life is meant to be. There's still like a little bit of a wanderlust or some sort of dissatisfied spark at the heart, and like it nails that.
It's also that what I enjoyed about that scene too is that they have this veneer of having, an adult dinner party before it just devolves into some teenage bullshit where they have the wine and they have the meat, but the meat just like doesn't, the food doesn't look appetizing in particular.
No.
It doesn't look like
it looks undercooked, doesn't it? Like it looks like you didn't cook enough. Yeah.
The food looks bad, and then it devolves into the shouting and the
even
childish behavior.
Even the line that the woman Fiona, who later might be like a witchish, cultish figure, as you find out, even her dialogue where she just says like what would be a social faux pas, Monty, she just stupidly says to her like potential future Irish boyfriend, like I don't really understood that island thing. It's basically the same religion, which is like the most. That's like going to fucking Croatia.
I know.
Were you guys basically Serbians before? Like, what are you saying? What are you like?
Yeah, I've never understood the whole Irish thing. As if it's all the same religion, so.
Not really, love.
They're all Christian.
That's true.
That's debatable.
But
So
what's
even
the
that
genius?
thing is so
The
well done.
genius of that line, though, the genius of that line is, you're right, Duncan. Mega social faux pas. Anyone who's got Irish family, don't ever imply Protestants and Catholics are the same on any level whatsoever. Like,
I used to live in Dublin, and I can't imagine saying that to an Irish
No, like,
person.
she goes, you all worship the same God, though, don't you? And he just goes, well, that's arguable, love, But anyway, but what the genius of that line is, she's a pagan.
Yeah, she's taking it.
So obviously, to her, she's making a very bold statement there, and then obviously she goes off to the bathroom, takes out the bloody tissues, carves that strange symbol in. You've been fucking marked, and you're going, what the fuck is this about? Like, it's great.
Oh, by the way, similar to what I said in that Prisoners review. Look, Prisoners is more about like a narrative that fits together. But in the same way as I said, if you ever rewatch Prisoners, you'll see all the things you thought were throwaways or red herrings are actually also tied into the plot. It's just you don't know how yet. It's the same in this, Richard. Like there's so many things where they'll just flash a symbol or show something for a second or imply something that at the moment you think, oh, that's just whatever. But like that, I think when I'm going to rewatch this probably in like a few months or something where I've forgotten enough because there are so many things that clearly are foreshadowed. In fact, even the plot itself, the parts about the plot that are structured just don't come out in the story. They're more like you have to remember scenes earlier, you have to remember what they were inferring or what the theme was, as you alluded to.
Yeah, and the other aspect of this, and this is something that Ben Wheatley has talked about in interviews, is he wanted to make a film that was basically his nightmares, essentially. And one of the things that he had a big problem with when he was a kid was the kind of disharmony in the household. Now again, it's probably an experience most of us have gone through where our parents are fighting and we're upstairs and we can hear it and we don't like it, but we're a kid and we can't really process what's going on. So you kind of like try and retreat away into doing whatever you're doing. La, 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 I'm playing with my toys, da, da, da. But you can hear this like, horrible thing going on over there. That's really disturbing for a kid. And one of the things this movie does is it absolutely nails like, this is a couple that are like hanging on by a thread. But the money issues have brought them to this absolute finite point, which again, during the financial crisis, this movie came out in 2011. We just kind of got over the hump.
They allude to that too in the movie. They allude to the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah, well, she literally says, she literally says, she says that you've got to go back to work. He goes, we got 40 grand in savings, and she goes, it's all gone.
It is all gone! Well, how can it possibly be fucking gone? There was 40 grand in there.
Yeah, 8 months ago, there was 40 grand in there.
8 months? How many fucking scatter cushions do you need?
And then he goes, well, why don't you take the holiday money to fix the jacuzzi, which costs these very, like, luxurious things that middle-class people could have prior to the financial crisis. And she goes, it's all fucking gone, you fucking dickhead.
Take the money for the jacuzzi out of the holiday, though. Can't have it out of action. It's from my back.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wake up, Jay! There is no fucking holiday money! And there is nothing wrong with your back! It's all in your fucking head!
They even have a fight over, he buys like £4 like sponge swords so he can have a play with the kid in the garden in the best act of foreshadowing in the film.
That's actually a very good piece of foreshadowing. They even have a fight where he's on her back at one point in the fight. Also, by the way, just as an aside, if people don't get, because this might be one that might be a little of a deep cut people might have missed, technically, when you have things like economic recessions and inflation, you are literally killing your kids' future because you are ruining the economy for them and the deficit, etc. So in that, you are metaphorically and financially killing your kids when you then take like print the money while they the inflation.
Well,
That's a real concept.
that's one of the like allegorical readings of this. Is
This is clearly also layered as well. There isn't like one reading for me.
No,
You could do
definitely
like 4
not.
or 5 different angles. That's what's so good about
there's
it. Yeah.
there's four things going on at once, essentially, maybe more. But like one of the very sort of allegorical readings that some people might not get, and I didn't get, thinking about it the first time, because I went in totally fresh and just I kind of watched it just as, like you said, just as an experience the first time. I wasn't really thinking at all the elements that were at play. But obviously, it's a soldier essentially sacrificing his sanity, his own family, in this sort of weird covenant, this weird contract that you have with society. And
that guy, Richard, that older guy, this is why it reminded me of Eyes Wide Shut. That is clearly a stand-in for like the upper classes or something, isn't it? Like that guy, he's perfectly cast as exactly that sort of figure, isn't he?
Well, I mean, that's essentially how it works. If you're a soldier, it is literally your blood. And so again, I can speak to this a little bit from personal experience. My family, basically, you had 2 choices in my family. Is the predestined road you could go down. You could be a criminal, right? You could get involved in all sorts of petty crime and that sort of shit, or you could join the military. We were just basically built for that. There weren't a lot of readers, weren't a lot of great thinkers in my family, and so anyway, I had a lot of people who joined the military. They took that latter path. And I remember going around to like my aunt's house, and when like my uncles were deployed, I watched these poor women raising kids by themselves on not a lot of money while they're abroad earning. And it was the same for people who went on the oil rigs. This was another job. You would just be away for months at a time that we grew up with in my environment. And I remember one of my aunts, she used to she was in prison. She had on the walls, like, counting down the days until my uncle would get back. Like, she physically had to put it up there just to keep her mind from, not snapping while she's got 3 kids running around, no money, who trying to make ends meet. And the toll being a soldier puts on your family, puts on the trust, puts on your time with the children. Again, this movie ultimately nails that, but it doesn't just nail it as like a plot detail. It nails it in terms of like the overarching reality of what it is to enter into that contract. And so Neil Maskell, he's losing his family, losing his mind, and ultimately at the end, which, spoiler once again, but no more warnings from this point onwards, the movie has him literally killing his family, unbeknownst to him, in a fight where his wife and the kid are made to look like a hunchback, and he literally stabs them to death. But then after that, what happens? All of the other people that were in his life, all these other elements, the upper class who hired him, the politicians, all these guys, they're all there applauding him. Well done. Bravo. That's exactly the price of entry into whatever the death cult is. And there's a broader kind of maybe understanding that for me, the death cult sort of just represents society, some sort of awful conformist nightmare that takes everything from you.
I know what you mean, Richard. Unironically, that part also reminded me of the film that you once recommended, the film called Society, where the horror of it is that is sort of what life is like. They use obviously a horror metaphor, but I agree, because if you think about it, it's all people that have been in all layers of his life. Like there's another part built into this as well. I agree with you on the soldier angle as well, which is everyone in it also tells him like thank you all the time for the shit he's doing, even though he's doing horrific violence. That is almost what it's like, isn't it? Yeah. At the time it seems like this is a bit off, but that is sort of what it's like. Yeah.
I mean, because it's definitely saying something about the type of people we lionize within our society. I mean, the kill list in and of itself is the tabloid wet dream for who you would want to. If you're a working class male, who are we supposed to hate? And obviously, look, what have we got on there? Corrupt priests, a pedophile, a politician. yeah, this is exactly the type of, targets that you're amped up every time you pick up the sun on a building site. They're telling you about these horrible people, the fucking priests are at it again, politicians ripping you off, expenses, pedophiles discovered in schools and all this. And well, if I got my fucking hands on them, if I got my hands on them, well, there's an aspect of the kind of machismo tabloid power fantasy at the heart of this, because you never really know what the priest has done.
No.
You don't know what the librarian's got. You just know it's fucking bad, right? And obviously the politician, well, I mean, that he doesn't even get to kill the politician.
I even think it's genius that when you see the scene where he's watching, what's funny is I notice a lot of people, by the way, assume it was like paedophilia. I actually, by the way, I thought it was going to be a snuff film or something. I actually think the fact they never show you anything, they just show his response is even more brilliant. Like, if they'd have even shown you a hint that what it was, again, it would imply that there's a narrative and he's going to catch these people, he's going to stop them. No, this is again like, it's just the horrors of the world.
But it goes back to kind of the duties of the blue collar class, right? Because who has to, at the end of the day, who has to watch those movies to determine if they're crimes? It's police officers, right? What a terrible job that is. And the fact that, and also who's responsible for doing this, because he's a soldier who's responsible for dealing with the bad guys. It's the soldier, and they can be saying thank you as he horribly beats them to death with a hammer.
Thank you.
But he's enacting his rage that he got. Obviously, we know Jay's character got this from some Iraq-Afghanistan conflict, and then he went into his mercenary life afterwards because he probably didn't have a lot of options in order to make money, and something mysterious happens in Kiev and in Ukraine, right, that we don't know, but apparently was really terrible, and now he's coming back.
I even have a detail on that for you. That, look, I'll say this very carefully because this is actually why now that scene's changed a lot. People now are going to think, they're going to think, oh, Ukraine, right? What people aren't going to remember is literally even a year before the Ukraine-Russia conflict, there were loads of news stories for the last 15 years that are like, Ukraine is the most corrupt country in Europe. And I mean corrupt on the level, by the way, of things like maybe they do produce films like that, Monte. Maybe there are all sorts of outrageous trafficking and stuff goes on there. So I even thought that was kind of interesting that that's where they reference he was, because at the time in 2011, like, bro, Ukraine's not got any world status at the time. In fact, at the time, they haven't even started all that Donbass region and stuff. Like, it's actually kind of an ominous place to list, like what they was in Ukraine doing some sort of a kill job. But again, it's a place that had a lot of like mob activity and criminal behavior and stuff. So to me, that's just an implication. You were just essentially, that's like saying you were in hell. You were in some place where all sorts of crazy shit's happening. That's why you come back. So I thought that was even interesting how that detail will have changed for people who watch it now, because you won't think of it that way now. Now you'll think of it as this big battlefield, isn't it?
The way that that Kiev is just sort of synonymous with, like, it ultimately all we know is something happened and Jay lost his fucking mind and probably did something absolutely awful. So it's kind of implied, again, given the overarching themes, maybe a kid died out there, maybe something bad like that, because I think obviously if you look at the sort of the dichotomy is, he's like, he gets outraged when he goes to the librarian's lockup and sees what might be, child endangerment, abuse, whatever, on that video. I mean, he gives the librarian one of the most gruesome torture deaths.
That's going to be one of the hardest scenes to watch in a film, isn't it? Especially the one where he's bashing his hand in. Fuck,
Nobody, I don't think anyone was prepared. I mean, again, I remember in the cinema, the audible gasps at this scene, because you go, all right, well, he's put his head on the table. They'll cut away from the head. No. You are going to watch the most realistic depiction of what a claw hammer can do to a human skull you will ever see committed to cinema.
Thank you.
And there's a reason why there is that visceral affront to it. I'm meant to protect kids. That's what I do, right? I want to protect my own kid. I want to, and so the fact that he ends up invariably killing his own child is obviously the thing, but also I think there's an implication that he might have already at some point crossed that taboo unwittingly in his military career, which, by the way, without being too unpleasant about it, a lot of veterans that have come back from war zones, particularly in like just ridiculous clusterfucks like Iraq and Afghanistan, yeah, sometimes your intel's bad and, you know, civilians get in the way, and those civilians include kids.
Not British, but I know an American guy who was in special forces who has PTSD from being in Iraq and Afghanistan. I have no idea what he went through, but I do know the effects of it. I do know the effects of it.
And that's the other thing with this movie. I think probably there's been no better exploration of PTSD committed to, I mean, maybe the Machinist, you can make an argument, although I think that's a bit more fantastical than this. This is very grounded. You know, what's going on with the PTSD? It just comes in super early. We know he hasn't worked. We know he's under pressure to work. We know he's pretending he's got a bad back. He's not addressing his problems. We know Gal, his friend, is coming around saying, you got to get back on the horse, big boy. You know what I mean? And like, Gal isn't affected by whatever went on in Kiev, whatever's gone on in his military career.
Kiev was...
Yeah, I know. Listen, man, it was 8 months ago. Gotta get back on the horse again. Do you know what I mean? It's all right. It's all right.
But then it's like, this is how pervasive and awful service and, you know, can be for soldiers. His son says, I want to hear a bedtime story. I want to hear a story about King Arthur. And he goes, right, well, I'm going to tell you this one instead. So anyway, there were two men, right? And they were in a car. And then some insurgent, has put down a fucking bomb inside a Hummer. And you go, bro, this is totally inappropriate. This is a bedtime story.
It is made up. They're going, yeah.
He's going, this is just made up, isn't it, Daddy? He's going, it's all. And it's like, that's what people, you know, like to him, the what is normal, it's entering his life.
So there were these insurgents, and they made a bomb. They blew up the Humvee in front of the column.
Not real though, is it?
No, not anymore, no.
And look, obviously as well, other aspects to this, when he goes to the doctor, and the doctor basically like says to him, like, you know, don't worry about it. It's all fine. He has this physical wound, which I believe is sort of a representation of the psychological scarring. It festers. It doesn't get better. It gets progressively worse over the movie. He goes to see a doctor. Doctor presses it. It's grotesque. He goes, oh, no, this is fine. This is normal. Don't worry about it and all of this. And obviously that's probably a broader statement about how the medical.
That's why I agree, Richard.
Feels,
how could anyone actually get to like that scene and still watch it like literally? Like in that scenario, to watch that scene literally, you'd now have to believe it's like literally eyes wide shut. And like the entire institution of the UK, like even his local GP's been like brought in to like, no, you're gonna say it's not. No, to me, I agree with you. That was more of a reading of like, either he's supposed to be imagining his wound and it never was there, and the guy's just sort of saying you've got psychological problems, or it's implying, like as you say, like obviously they can't fix war PTSD, so they're just going, well, don't worry about it, it's okay.
They won't
just
fix
just go on with it.
Yeah, they won't fix it. You know, and it's interesting too because you know PTSD has been ignored. I mean, we can go back to The Master, right, and the way that they were trying to deal with PTSD in that movie, right, with the kind of, I would say, primitive psychology of the 1940s and 1950s. And these people have these issues. But again, it's about you do your service, right? And you've been exposed to these horrible things. You're given a thank you and you're supposed to be treated honorably, but it doesn't actually help your life. They don't address the problems that you return with. And indeed, you can't escape this life because now it's the only thing you're kind of good for at this point in time.
I've got a little bit on that actually that is relevant to this film. One is like, one of the things I find so absurd about this, actually, this ties into the themes of the film, about the way that people treat the idea of being a soldier, is they actually treat it, because they bill it to you this way in the modern day. Remember, in the modern day, they don't even try, we don't even get the 20 years ago reach around of like, you're doing it for like civilization and, you know, they want to destroy us and kill our. Now you just get nothing. Now it's just a job. They treat it like it's like Uber Eats or something, Monte, and it's like, oh, you just did that for a year or two. It's like, no, here's the premise. There's an old joke that goes like, when the tiger stops riding the little tricycle at the circus and kills everyone goes, it's gone crazy. And the joke the comedian goes is, no, that's what a tiger does. Like, well, it's crazy that it was ever on a tricycle pretending to be a fucking like trained animal. That's the insanity, that you framed it the wrong way around. Similarly, right, when a soldier has been out to another country, not even people who ever themselves challenged him or in any way were going to fuck him up, and on someone else's orders killed people, including potentially a bunch of civilians, when they then come back and you go, right, congratulations, you're no longer a soldier, that was just like a thing you did for a few years, you're now a guy who just delivers people's mail. How the fuck is he supposed to go, right, well, mentally wipe that away? That's right, it was just another thing, I was just another gig. No, that's going to sit with you, it's going to haunt you. Like, there's even an angle someone told me, which I thought was brilliant, because I'd never thought this perspective, where they said one of the things apparently some veterans struggle with is that also you've given them a framework that will never again work in their life. So they actually said one of the worst things about coming back and being a normal person is when you were in this war zone, yeah, the stakes are crazy, the intensity is crazy, people are dying, but there's solutions. Like, if I kill that guy there, I've accomplished today's mission. If we survive till this point, then you go back to the real world and it is just some annoying office space boss guy. Hey, could you just like work overtime? You can't kill that guy. There's never going to be an outlet, by the way, ever for your like anger, your rage, your resentment, all the things. There's no, you're back to the banal, mundane life. That's the worst part. So I've heard that's another reason like you can never reintegrate. Because essentially, the most obvious analogy, I'll give you the best like archetypal one, is it's why at the end of Lord of the Rings, of course, Frodo can't actually just go and be a hobbit in fucking the Shire again. It's the craziest adventures ever. Like, as you saw, even Bilbo couldn't, like, at that point, of course, he has to go off and go with the elves or whatever the fuck. Like, he can't be the old person he was before, which is one of the lessons surely
even hobbits get PTSD.
Basically, yeah, exactly.
So I love all of that. I love as well. Like, there's little flashes to, you can see how probably Kiev went bad, because let's be real. Like, Jay says in a scene where he goes like, what? He goes, so anyway, we're gonna do this then, professional then, big boy, and he goes, what? As opposed to mowing them down like a hackney cracker in a hail of bullets. And then the thing is, Jay is implying he's a professional hitman. Jay's a psycho. Jay's an absolute psycho. Not only does he do that ridiculous fucking torture of that guy, he then goes to the lockup, kills everyone in the lockup who isn't even on the list. And then when they see the death cult coming out on the members of parliament's grounds and watching the human sacrifice ritual, he's the one who just opens fire with an assault rifle. Like, what are you doing?
There's too many of them, man. Don't fuck this.
There's dozens
well,
of them.
It's like it's a battleground scene, right? It's like
exactly.
It's a battleground scene.
Yeah, he just fucking goes full.
Also, there is something dark there about him having PTSD from Afghanistan and Iraq, and him opening fire on people in a religious ritual. You got to wonder about that one too.
Yeah, for sure. And look, obviously gets his mate Gal fucking killed, which, you know, fair enough. I think that was foreshadowed in that scene where for some reason the cultists are screaming like they're feral beasts. I don't even know what's happened there. That's crazy. But you know, obviously he has to put down his friend Gal, which I thought there was some nice foreshadowing there with like the rabbit and all of that stuff.
Sorry.
But anyway, I mean, yeah, Jay's a fucking lunatic, actually. But like, you know, driven to that point, but probably by his experiences in the military, sure. But you can see immediately, for all of Jay's bluster about doing it professional and all of this stuff, he's more than happy to go off script.
Yeah, but I think that's what's interesting about potentially the PTSD angle too, because if he has been made this way by having to do heinous crimes and he knows he's capable of doing these like ridiculous torture, I think if he was using that at the behest of somebody else, or he feels guilty about what he did previously, one of the ways you can feel potentially better about yourself is to use those skills in the service of something that you believe is righteous, right? And I think that's why he flies off the handle, because he watches those videos and he's like, well, I'm actually capable of just going and ending this, right?
Ending
this thing.
hero, potentially, right? At certain points of the film, yeah.
I mean, the other interesting part about this, there's another like theory around this movie, which is ultimately all of these things are essentially a test to see whether or not Jay can become sort of in the upper echelons of the death cult because he rejects
Right.
God.
Okay.
And obviously we can assume Gal, being a good Irish Catholic, is religious. Well, he gets sacrificed, doesn't he? He gets killed. But obviously Jay does reject God on a number of occasions, and it's like subtle. You know, for instance, he kills the priest. That he's the one who fires the bullet and just goes, "Why was he smiling?" And Gal's like, "Oh, he's probably at peace or something, wasn't he?" Right?
Why do you think he had that smile on his face?
Probably at peace, you know.
How much at peace I'd feel if I was getting a fucking bullet in the back of my head.
And then you know you have later
That's
on
the scene
when
with the people playing the guitar. Yeah.
onward Christian soldiers, right?
Giving me indigestion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Apology accepted.
Two good
And
Christian
at the beginning of the
soldiers going on
film,
mission.
when
Yeah.
the gal guy wants to say grace, even
Yeah.
his wife won't let
He
him do
won't-
it. By the way,
won't let him
Swedes
do it
also
around the
famously
table.
not very religious people. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually all. There's loads of foreshadowing in this film. It's crazy, isn't it, Richard?
Obviously what he is essentially embracing paganism by rejecting the Christian God, and obviously gets his reward at the end by having sacrificed his religious friend, his wife, his kid, and ultimately is then welcomed into the cult. If you sort of take it at a literal reading, I think allegorically speaking, it's probably saying something about how an absence of, there's something in there about like the expectation of traditional Christian values in the British nuclear household and how that's been eroded and what that can lead to. But you'll also notice in the movie we see loads of kind of like symbols from the cult and loads of kind of things like that. There's not a lot of Christian iconography in the film outside of the actual priest at a church, and even then, that you don't see a lot of that in the movie, despite the fact that it does have these, broad Christian themes in there, which also as well probably does interlink with the Arthurian legend a little bit, some of that stuff. So, I mean, as I said, in terms of like just being able to put your brain into this insane soup of everything that's going on, this is one of those movies where you can come up with all sorts of theories about this movie. There's so many different ways to like interpret it, and the beauty of it is none of them are wrong. This film has that nightmare dream logic where everything is interconnected, even if it doesn't pass and make linear sense.
I actually did think as well in this film that if anything, if I was going to tweak it, I would actually take out like a couple of the things that foreshadow. Because I think, for example, maybe this is effective for some people, but I actually think the magic elements almost become like a red herring. To me, I do think that's what makes people think, Richard, at the end, that there has to be a scene after like the wife laughs.
Yeah.
Like, oh, so was she in the cult too? And like, is he in now or whatever? Because the problem is when they show, I mean, first of all, the movie literally begins with showing that like rune type symbol on the screen. But then obviously very early on, that Fiona woman, the girlfriend of the gal person, does that carving on the back of the thing, which obviously evocates, what's that referring to? It's clearly like some sort of like a runic symbol again. But I actually think, unfortunately, that aspect is what's going to make people think it's a traditional narrative, and they're going to find out who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, why was he killing people? Was that, you never find that part out. And even some of the magic elements are like quite subtle. Like if you don't know, actually, in the same way as there's that famous saying in history, Monty, that like poison is a woman's weapon, because it's not like you don't directly confront someone, you sort of secretly kill them and you can protect your identity and you can do it for political reasons. I would say, if people don't know, women's magic is the type of magic in this film. It's like voodoo, for example, where you do things like you collect like items of people's hair or blood, like she's doing here, because they're supposed to have like connection to the life force, and therefore that like imbues whatever magical ritual you're doing in a way that ties it psychically to them. Like if people don't know, funny enough, it's funny that like Haiti was in the news recently, but places like that have had a lot of like it's traditionally African people who've been put into like really fucked up like slave scenarios. Their religions tend to be incredibly dark. Like they will have concepts that for real, like you take like an animal, traditionally a chicken, and just torture it till it's dead, but as much as you can, with the notion you're like raising energy from doing so that you can then you put to some magical end. Because again, it's almost like the fucking color in Magic the Gathering black if people don't get it. It's the idea that you have to like sacrifice something yourself to then like get the power and then do something else with it to get, but there's a negative aspect to it. It's a very dark version of it. It's not some sort of white magic where you're healing people with potions. It's like you're striking down people that you despise or hate, etc. There's some of that like seeded into this, and obviously at the end with this whole ritual where he kills him and his wife's laughing like a witch or something. Sadly, I get the feeling that's going to torture people who need there to be a narrative. Like you're just going to rack your brain. Whereas I'm with you, Richard. In fact, even if I hadn't have had the reading, which I got quite early on, which is like they're clearly not going to ever explain things. These are just supposed to be scenes that sit with you. So when it got to that part at the end, I never took that part as literally like, oh my god, what was she doing the whole film? It's like, oh, that was. But I mean, that was allegorical to me, you know.
Cure was already a film in this arc where they didn't explain anything, right? Like you basically just get the idea that it's the propagation of whatever weird religion.
To anyone who's disappointed in this, not in all films, there's plenty of films don't explain themselves well, but in this particular film, I would genuinely say this to you. You know, when I said earlier, I think it's superior that it maintains the mystique by not explaining. This is where I want you to sit down and for real, if you think this film did a bad job, here's a little task I've got for you. Pause this video and you've got 5 minutes. You've got 5 minutes to write down what would have been a satisfying narrative to this film, because I guarantee you can't do it. Like anything you try and do, even if it's like this, I'll do one like that. Okay, so in the video, those videos are both paedophilia and snuff films. What he's seeing is he's seeing the eyes wide shut things we never got to see in that film of what are they doing in those mansions. And then he's finding out on this kill list that like initially it is people that are fucked with the cult, but eventually it's going to be, you know, that's worse. That's actually a worse film, guys. If I actually know for real that's what it was, it is a worse film, I'm telling you. It's actually better that these things are just really evocative and mysterious, I think. It's way better, in my opinion.
It's just one of the tilters for me about the constant need in the modern world to just explain every little piece of lore. And it's like, you don't need more lore. Like, for example, in Star Wars, we didn't need midichlorians to tell you about the level in the blood of the Force. That is stupid. It makes the Force worse.
Yes.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Buddhist space magic, guys, and it was cooler when it was just that, and it wasn't something you could just measure in somebody, okay? You know, I've said this about Firefly, but I hated the fact that in Serenity, the movie, they explained that the Reavers had a disease, because the cool thing about the Reavers was they were just mysterious, insane people in space. That was fun. Why do we have to explain things? It actually ruins it. It would have ruined Cure if we had known the exact function of the mesmers. And people are always like, but what about the lore? I need this supplemental material to my world. Like, no, it's just better when you can fill in the gaps, when you're thinking about it for yourself. And with this film also, what is so cool about this is it's not explained, you know, what the cult is, what they're worshiping, why they want Jay to do what Jay is doing, because they plant Fiona in there earlier. Is Jay's wife part of this? My answer would be no, because she's actually trying to fire at the cultists and kill them at the end. And I think it'd be weird if she was, you know, a plant or part of this system. And I think she was manipulated by Fiona. You know, Fiona very deliberately gets into a relationship with Gal in order to get into the house, to get closer to him, to start taking, you know, Jay's DNA, basically his blood, for ritualistic purposes. And the whole thing is just a setup by the cult, because the client, the guy who was hiring them, is there at the end of the movie too when they take off their masks. The doctor's there, and the guy who hired them is there, and Fiona's there, right? They were basically step by step invading his life. And this movie is not scary. It isn't creepy if you have an answer to that. The idea is Jay has no fucking clue what is going on, and neither do you, because by the end, when he kills his wife and he kills his son, and then they put the crown of sticks on his head, he has no idea. And it's like the end of Cure too. Does Takabe, is he manipulating people now? Has he internalized like these powers of mesmerism? Is he going to use them to the same ends, right? That Mamiya
What's
did?
like your favorite film, Monty? Whenever you reference Hereditary, I actually wonder, because I've never talked to any plebs about it. And I actually think that film is one that suffers from people interpreting it literally as like, oh, it was just a cult. It's like, bro, isn't that just the ultimate thing about like mental health in people's family histories? To me, it was like the ultimate metaphor.
I hate that people strip out the mental health. I'll agree from that movie,
because it was about that cultist.
It's so exactly, because it is so profound. Like,
it's one of the best parts about it.
Yes, exactly. It really bothers me with that, where it's like, oh, and on the second viewing, if you realize you must watch the film literally, like, no, it's two things. It's like this. It's, you know what I mean?
So yeah, I mean, I think the cult aspects are interesting, but there's clearly, as we've talked about in terms of class stuff, in terms of PTSD, in terms of mental health, there's a lot of symbolism that is being taken here.
Yeah.
But this movie would be ruined by the like, even if you take this movie on the most basic literal level, it is still ruined by explaining too much, because the creepiness of it and the horror of it is the idea that even somebody as dangerous, as violent, as badass, as hardened as Jay is being manipulated in this scenario to commit heinous crimes, right? And he can't see what's going on. It is terrifying to think that somebody like that we could be manipulated by these forces outside of our control to do things that are just objectively against our best interests, right? It's terrifying.
Well, I mean, look,
surely the scene where he just, for no reason, just cuts his own hand again. Surely you can't be watching this literally, guys. Surely this has to be metaphorical on some level. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, look,
I can't believe, Richard, there's really a person out there who's like, so how was she laughing, but then she was killing people? And wait a minute, that doctor's really, he should be stricken off. He's not even...
I've talked to him. I recommend this movie to everyone. I recommend this movie to everyone, right? Like, this is the first movie I watched with my Discord, everything. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. There are so many people who just think this is a literal cult movie, right? But like, let me also...
That is my, I've said it a million times, but that is my go-to triggered movie opinion, is when people watch The Prestige and they go, problem is, it didn't really make sense. I want to be like...
It didn't make sense. It's like, it holds up absolutely logically if you just know what the movie's about. I know, it's crazy. But look, there's one of the aspect of this I'll bring into, and then unfortunately we will have to talk about a Serbian film, right? But the other aspect of this is, and this is dark, but this is a dark film. I think there's an aspect of the way the plot goes with him being all the pressures of the family, you know, raising the kid, you know, the kids waking him up, wake up, opening his eyes when he's just trying to get a good night's kip. The wife just screaming at him constantly, can't even have a dinner party. The jacuzzi that I got for my back doesn't even fucking work, and we ain't got the money to fix it. Yeah. Right, and it's just all of that. And then at the end, obviously, he kills his family, right? Like, he kills his family. You know, there's that aspect of the dark wish fulfillment. Like, I just wish these people
also
weren't around
Insecure.
fucking... Yeah, exactly. And so, when people always go, oh, she laughed at the end, that meant she knew she was in the cult. No, it's like, for me, I always just interpreted that to be, well, that's just fucking typical, isn't it? Because, you know, she forced him back to work. He was meant to be doing it all for them. And then he turns up in a mask and fucking stabs them both to death. And it's the last thing she sees. Remember, by the way, as well, she was a soldier as well. She did Swedish national service.
Yes, they do actually go out their way to say that, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, again, back to that, right? Back to that aspect of the movie. So I think there's also an element of the dark wish fulfillment at the heart.
Here's another thing, Richard. If you think about what she even says, that's even more evocative now you mention it. Because remember her line, when they go like, why do you do the service? She goes, why let all the boys have all the fun?
Is that you?
Swedish National Service.
I didn't know they made girls do that.
Oh, they don't. I wanted to do it. Why should the boys have all the fun here?
Well, that is the naive idea. Maybe a silly feminist who doesn't know what war is might think of, like, oh, you're getting it. It's like, bro, people don't want to be involved in these scenarios. It ruins your life. It's not a good thing. We're not enjoying it.
I mean, I'll also say my reading of that is it's almost she's being facetious a little bit, because she is saying it to that Fiona who has come across, even though she's in the cult and she's a witch and all this other stuff, she's deliberately made herself look like a total fucking
like
moron at this dinner party. Yeah, like, you know, like, I mean, that mate, when he holds up the photo and they're there in their uniforms, by the way, those private military uniforms where they're working in Kiev for no code, just for money, where all the shit goes down. What's the first thing she says? Is it dangerous? It's so mental. Sure. But like, obviously she's doing it on purpose, I guess, if you read the movie. So look,
I do like though that Fiona does talk about her job in human resources as getting,
that's a good one.
Really,
you know,
that's fantastic. Yeah, that's also
doing the dirty
line.
work, right? And then you realize what happens to it with her later. It's a very funny piece of foreshadowing there.
Human resources.
Hatchet man. Sorry. Hatchet person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, she also disappears, doesn't she? Once she's got the blood and all the stuff she needs for whatever fucked up ritual that's going on in the literal reading of the film, she then fucks off because in that scene after the dinner party, Gal goes, "I woke up with a Dear John letter taped to my cock,"
It's
which
a hell of
is
a line.
also
I know, it's a
fucking
banger,
so.
innit? I know.
Michael Smiley in
Yeah.
this movie is
I
absolutely.
mean, the movie's
fucking
funny
stellar.
too. I think that's one of the best parts of it.
really-
It is actually very
Yeah.
funny.
I think I was a bit of a bad boy last night. Woke up this morning with a Dear John taped to my cock.
You joking?
No.
Yeah, it's the funniest.
I mean, that
most
hammer scene we were
disturbing
talking
Lynchian
about.
nightmare.
The hammer scene we were talking about
Oh.
is more funny because the guy is saying, "Oh, thank you,"
Yeah,
and
yeah.
being very genuine during it. It is funny.
Well, this is the other aspect. Like, again, on the literal reading, all of the targets are grateful for being murdered for some reason. And the pedophile librarian sicko who gets the hammering, the worst hammering I've ever seen. Like, it's just unbelievable. All the while, as he's smashing his kneecaps off, smashing his fingers, where his fingers aren't meant to go, he's going, "Thank you, thank you."
It's very
thank
funny.
you." Yeah, it is. It's real funny right up until that first one on the head where he just goes, "You horrible cunt," and he's totally lost it. So, I mean, look, so much to enjoy about the film, even though we are just talking about a really gruesome torture scene. But now I want to get the Serbian.
One last thing.
Yeah,
There is one
okay.
scene which everyone forgets in this film, though. It's bizarre. Everyone talks about the first kill on the librarian. Everyone talks
Yep,
about the
yep.
last one, the hunchback.
Yep.
Everyone forgets the one where he goes to the porn producers. Where if
Yep.
you missed the premise, because this is where you're gonna have to like remember the way it was. The other guy's waiting for him to get the job done, isn't he? And the premise goes, he thinks he's been in there 5 minutes. Well, remember when that guy comes in, he's smashing that person's head off the wall over.
Yeah.
He's just been smashing that guy's head off the wall for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
This guy, if you're still interpreting this literally, surely you get that this guy's lost his fucking mind. Like, he's clear. The whole point is, I even thought that's clever about the way they show the film, because I almost feel like I'm experiencing things in like a temporarily messed with way, and scenes don't make sense, and obviously that wasn't really what the person said, but I heard something. I think that part's very effective for the idea of like someone who's been through like war trauma or something, because again, that scene in itself is like low key. It's very subtle, but that's horrifying. The idea there is, not only in Kiev did he obviously go mental and probably kill people and stuff like that, but in this scenario, he isn't just like, you notice in these situations, guys, he could just kill them all like that priest at the beginning, just one bullet to the back of the head, silence. He's going out of his way to torture these motherfuckers like a demon. By the way, they even throw that line in. Again, a totally reasonable everyday comment. She's a demon in bed. She's a literal fucking cultist black witch priestess, you lunatic. Everything is laid in this film, I'm telling you. Everything's laid.
Oh, she's a good-looking girl.
She's a bit of a fucking demon in bed as well, I tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking hell. Ooh.
Yeah, and also that is a good point. Like when he's killing them all in the lockup, and like he's been smashing that guy's head off a wall.
Face looks so unreasonably
gone, right?
matched. It's insane.
And then Gal goes, "Well, what are we gonna do with that then?" And he just pulls out a gun and he shoots him twice, and he goes, "Brilliant, just brilliant, just brilliant." Like he's just seen it all with Jay. Like Gal. By the way, I do want to say on the record, like, nobody deserves a friend like Jay, and everybody deserves a friend like Gal. Like, everyone needs a lovable drunk Irish rogue in their life, but Jay's just a maniac. He is just a maniac the whole time.
I mean, doesn't Gal kind of deserve it? He did beg Jay to come back and do this at the end of the day.
Yeah, obviously, again, it goes to the broader themes of the movie. They're all architects of their own downfall, because we're putting this man in a pressure cooker when we know he can't handle it because he's fucked. You know what I mean? But that's what society does, isn't it? It's what it does to all of us. We're all in that pressure cooker. We're all in that pressure cooker. Even if you punch in a clock 9 to 5, you're in. Breadwinners are in the pressure cooker. That's what this movie is saying as well. You know, if you're a breadwinner, this is what it's like. The pressure, the unbelievable, unrelenting pressure. And you've just got all these dickheads and all these forces external to you, just pulling imaginary strings, you know, on the fucking tapestry of your life. You know, it's like really fucked up. So I'll do the Serbian film thing. We can go back if we need to, but I don't know. Have you guys seen the Serbian film?
Yeah. Sadly, even though I'll say it as an outset, one thing I've always hated, Richard, is that's exactly the sort of... This film is like a million times better version. A Serbian film is the type of horror film I despise, mate, where it is just that thing of... It's almost like when you're a kid with the faces of death thing. It's just people being like, have you seen this really fucked up thing? It's like, but is it good though, bro? Because the problem with that film is it isn't good. It's just like, it's so over the top. Like, to me, I always thought that film lacked a bit of art, you know?
For me, maybe I'm the maniac. I actually I love A Serbian Film. I think it's one of the most unfairly maligned horror movies. I think it's
that's the clip to start the episode with Richard just starting. I love A Serbian Film. It's one of the most unfairly. And then they're just going, foreplay, ding ding. Here we go, guys. Like, start with that clip. I noticed he did do that.
I'm still dying with my chest infection. This might be the last thing I ever say.
Shout out to the editor. I noticed on the Gonjiam one, they did do it so it opens with Monte, like, and you can have your ass hanging out of like jeans. Amazing. I love it.
Out of context clips. But anyway, no, I think The Serbian Film is a really good film, and I think it's very misunderstood. Okay. Because obviously on the surface level reading, it's a meta commentary about how our exposure to extreme types of content will eventually, over time, you'll become progressively more extreme. Yeah. Now, considering this movie came out in 2010, which is key to the anecdote I'm going to tell here, you know, that's quite prescient with where the internet went and everything. But obviously as well, the people that created it, they're saying ultimately this is what the state does to its people. It progressively takes liberties under the guise of participatory democracy.
Oh, so you took a political reading because it's Serbian as well, right? I see, right? Okay.
Yeah, well, no, but I mean, the director actually came out and said that's what the movie is explicitly about, and he doesn't get why people don't get it. And when you understand that and you go back and you watch it, now look, this is also a movie where multiple people are killed with erections.
It's really horrible.
I understand, and I won't even describe
it's genuinely
the
one of the
famous
worst films I've ever seen. It's really bad.
So, but like, okay, so stop me if this sounds familiar, right? Yeah. A guy who is a legendary porn star is in retirement because he's grown distasteful of that type of work, gets called up by a shadowy cabal to do one more movie, the most extreme movie of all time, but only he can do it because of his incredible ability to maintain, tumescence during scenes, no matter how hard. Anyway, as he gets brought back into this shadowy, murky world, he loses his mind, literally loses his memory after being drugged, and is trying to piece together the memory of what he's done by looking at fragments from handheld recording movies. At the end, he goes to confront and kill the cult, the group that have brought him in to make this film, and they say you can just film one more scene. And again, without being too graphic, in that scene it turns out essentially he ends up defiling his family. He then decides to go home, and his family all lie down in a row on the bed, commit suicide with a one-shot bullet that goes all through them. And as they lie there dying on the bed, a film crew comes in and starts filming it. And the guy goes, "Let's start with the little one." Cut to credits. Now, that, by the way, I think just even describing it like that, you can see the inherent brilliance of the movie. But if you watch it and understand it as a political metaphor, it gets really good. But here's the thing. A Serbian Film was a notorious movie because of all of its grotesque scenes that had to be cut out. It got banned in most countries upon release. It didn't get a box office release. It made no money, but it was going around the film festival circuit in 2010. Kill List comes out in 2011. Ben Wheatley was on that film circuit. Now, when I think about Jay, a retired soldier brought back for one last job by a shadowy cabal, follows it through to its logical conclusion, ends up unknowingly killing his wife and kids, who was disguised by blankets, and then having to live with the consequences. There are a lot of plot beats that are similar. And so people, have theorized that Ben Wheatley had this like loose script for Kill List out there. He went on the film circuit, caught a Serbian film, and added those elements in, and that's how we end up with the twist ending of the movie.
Do you think this film was better than A Serbian Film?
Oh, absolutely. I think this film is amazing. I think this film, again, 6.4 on IMDb. Dickheads.
It's crazy. Yes,
it's crazy.
Yeah, this movie for me is the hidden
this movie at its
British
most
cinema.
literal level. It's still very interesting. Is very well paced, very well edited, extremely well acted. it being at 6.4 is nuts.
Yeah, and so
And it only has 46k reviews. That's fuck all, mate. That's crazy.
Nobody has seen this film. Like this was the deepest cut on the list, if you can believe it, because people have seen Gonjiam Haunted Asylum. Like you go on Reddit, all the normies are there going, and let me tell you about a little film you've never heard of, Gonjiam. Yeah, we get it, mate. Everybody knows about it, right? But like Kill List is the one where people are like, nah, never even heard of it. Also, it's a very British movie. It didn't have like cultural export to America. I think I was wondering how Monte would, absorb this one based on that, because there's a lot of Britishisms in it, and also the accents are very strong.
Oh, for sure.
With the Irish and the East End London.
As I said, I lived in Ireland, and I know many British people for my whole life.
So maybe you're not typical in that sense, But some, I'm sure some Americans might not get this movie. But anyway, so for me, like there is that little. I'm not saying that he did crib a little bit from a Serbian film, but it would be remiss of me, because there'll never be an opportunity. Right? There'll never be an opportunity to do a foreplay on a Serbian film. We'll never be doing that. So this is the only opportunity I'll ever have to talk about that film. But anyway, that is a theory that's in the background, that he took elements from that and put it in the script. But I don't believe that. Sometimes it's just one of those, serendipitous. You do just get things that are exploring similar themes. But yeah, ultimately, bringing it back to talking about Kill List, I think in terms of movies that you can watch over and over and over again in your life, and depending where you are in your life, it'll hit you a little bit different. Depending on details you remember, it'll hit you a little bit different. This is the movie I love showing to people. This is the movie I love sharing with people, because I think, first of all, you can tell a lot about the person based on which elements leap out to them. Like I haven't even talked to Monte about the Arthurian stuff, which that's definitely in his wheelhouse. But you know immediately whether your friend's a bit of a normie if he goes, but what happens at the end with the cult? Then was she in it? And that, right? All right, okay, cool. We won't watch films together again. That's fine.
Oh, you will, but at that point, there's a very different list you'll be recommending. It'll be more sort of Jail and Silent Bob Strike Back, as opposed to
exactly.
like you said,
something a bit
deeper.
Yeah, exactly. But then again, by the way, also just throwing this out there, I have a soft spot for Tusk, which everyone hates, and I have a soft spot for that movie.
Kevin Smith, and I can't stand that. That's the fucking insane take, but whatever. That's a bad
Listen,
one.
it's just a comedy version of the Human Centipede. What's not to love? Anyway, whatever. And the Human Centipede is a comedy anyway. So, look. So, I mean, this is the movie that just has so much going on that it will just reward multiple viewings. In a way, if I had to think of an analogy for what it's kind of like, I would say it rewards repeat viewings in the same way that like Fight Club might. Sure. There's things in the background of every scene.
I mean, the point of that is, if people don't know, the reason why Fight Club is the best example is because once you already know what's going to happen, you don't have that like tension of rushing through the plot in your mind. You can ease into it and go, how does this fit into that? I agree. That's why I'm actually looking forward to a rewatch, because I feel like now that I already know all the stuff at the end, I'll be able to like take it in a lot differently. In terms
Fight
of
Club will definitely show up on this show at some point in time.
Sure.
Yeah, we just us screaming at each other because we've all got the wrong interpretation of what the author intended or something. That'll be good. That'll be fun.
I've read the book.
Yeah, sorry,
too,
Monte.
so. But anyway,
dude, I've got the official sequels up there, which are
good.
comic books. Yeah, they actually made sequels. If you want to know what happens after he gets out of the asylum, read Fight Club 2. Spoiler: he marries Marla and they're miserable, and then Tyler comes back. Whatever.
I don't think I want to know. I think that's one of those mysteries, best left.
It didn't need a sequel.
Unsaid.
Chuck. I'm just putting that out there. It didn't need a sequel.
No, I think, one of the things that I do kind of lament having seen this now is just the name. Like, I'm not a big fan of the title Kill List for this movie.
Interesting. Why is that?
Because I think that if you were to tell somebody the premise of this and have it be called Kill List, it sounds like a very different movie than it actually is.
But that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
I love that it lures people in. A kill list. and then like you might like read two hitmen being this is going to be an action movie. This is fucking.
What I actually thought was brilliant was I look, they didn't quite stress this as much as they could have. I thought the whole premise of what they were going to do when I saw that initial premise, the name, the little blurb, was this is going to be treated like it's a world but secular, there's no magic. It's going to be a hitman just going around, but then he's going to like stumble on like Devil Rides Out style into some like insane like satanic fucking ritual thing. You go, what the fuck? Whereas they didn't really. I will say the one thing I think the other way around. I think Kill This is a brilliant name. What I would change is I think the cover's ridiculous because the cover does give like a massive sort of spoiler if you know what's not watching the film as to what's going to happen. Whereas I would rather the cover was just like a guy with a list or something, something very mundane. Because I do think the best aspect of this is that it sort of goes crazy after a certain point in the film. Aside from that, it really is a slow burn. Like I say, if they hadn't put that music behind most of the scenes, you'd just treat it like it was like a fucking TV soap opera or something. You're really good.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I think the list is kind of important as well because it's the mundanity, the almost like chore-like element. Keep in mind, this is a horror movie couched in.
He's also basically they're also murdering public servants for the most part, right? The names, the priest, the MP,
the librarian.
I mean, these are people who are supposed to be in service to their communities, and he's going around
quite literally. Quite literally.
As you say, the clever thing they do, which actually maybe allows people to not think about the bigger things and what was he doing in Kiev and does he have PTSD, is the fact that because the first few people he's killing are clearly terrible people, you're thinking, like you're saying, he's just an anti-hero, isn't he? Some sort of like fucked up Punisher character just going out there and wrecking. Exactly. So that makes you even sort of yourself not fully believe like how ridiculously off the rails he's gone, because obviously by the time he even gets, like I said, to that porn producer, he's already lost the plot, mate. He's gone at that point, his head's gone.
Well, I mean, they also say it as well. And again, it sort of shows the commentary about like failing institutions. We don't know what the priest has done. The priest kill is relatively quick. There's no information about it. We just see him with his parishioners. He's smoking a cigarette. They come out of the room. It's all plastic. He goes, thank you, turns around, bosh, done, body burnt, and that's that. But when they have a conversation about it, they're like, well, what do you reckon he's done then? He's a priest. He's probably fucked some kids.
He's probably shagging kids. Might get you a pass on all the other terrible shit you've done.
It's complicated.
As a parent, I'd do them all, even if I weren't getting paid.
Right? That's a mad thing to just sort of dismissively say, but actually, it doesn't even register with you at home because, it's a priest. That's what we've come to associate the Catholic Church with, unfortunately, because of the actions of the Vatican, and so many priests have been found guilty of abuse and been protected by upper authorities. What happens when people get that protection from institutions? Well, the only way you can really sort of redress that is through these illegal, horrifying criminal means. So it's like, there's just little snippets like that, which are like, it seems really like artificial and really superficial, but they're not. This movie is saying something every single time. Like every line of dialogue is flawless, even though I'm sure they improvised a lot of it. Particularly in the fight scene, not in the face, and then he smashes that cup off the back of his head. Brilliant.
Your relationships have been so very successful, Gal, so thanks very much for your advice, you cunt.
Oh, what the fuck is that fucking... Right in the face!
But yeah, I mean, like, obviously, we don't know what the priest has done. We never know. It's never out there. But we can make our own assumptions based on the people that are being targeted. Like, we know by the time it gets to the MP, well, he's a politician. He's a wrong'un, right? He's going to be a wrong'un. He's going to have done something bad. So it's almost playing with your expectations, like what you, as somebody, who's absorbed like the news, the media. It's playing with your expectations, what you think these people are like. And like Duncan says, there's probably people out there like who are watching this going, yeah, Jay's great. I love Jay. He's a hero. Love him. Shame how he accidentally killed his family at the end and ends up being crowned into the death cult that he was fighting against. But whatever.
I do want to. I mean, you touched on it earlier, Thorin, but I do think like a lot of the foreshadowing in this film is really good. And the when the play sword acting, when they're fighting in the garden and the boy is riding on the mother and they're stabbing each other with the fake swords to the end of the movie is amazing. Actually, it's it's such a cool thing because you think absolutely nothing of this at the time. It's a domestic scene designed to build out their characters, right? And yet it really does come full circle with the Hunchback thing. I thought it was a really nice touch.
And what he's referring to with the Arthurian thing, like that isn't even just like some fan thing. That has to be in there. They go out of their way to say that stuff out 50 times, like the thing with the dog and all that. Yeah, it's like they
there even is like Arthur. There even is Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot vibes because you kind of wonder if Gal and Jay's wife are, up to something.
What name even would fucking Gal be short for? I've never. What is there an Irish name like that? I've never heard of it. Yeah. In fact, the joke is it's only for Richard. I thought it was fucking a movie about Ian Wright because he just calls everyone fucking Gal all the time. I didn't even realize that was the guy's name. I did realize. Don't worry about that. That's all right. And then the other part is like they also remember there's that scene where he literally says, like as you say, like you could call you whatever, like Queenie or something like that. In terms of her. And then at the end, he's crowned. You know what I mean? And if people don't know, the original pagan religions of England, like the Druids and shit, that was all fertility cult shit. In fact, in Ireland specifically, by the way, they used to do that like divine killing of the king thing where they make you king for a few years and they kill you, like your fertility with like your wife and all your court or whatever to like make the crops come again. So to me, it was clearly trying to allude to some of those elements too.
Yeah. Obviously as well, the wound that doesn't heal. That's is that Fisher King, right?
The Fisher King, yeah.
One of the Grail legends, yeah.
So
that's a wound in the groin typically, but it is. It also kind of alludes to Jesus as well.
The stigmata, sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Fair. An infected stigmata. Yeah, I didn't really think about that. I suppose. Yeah.
That's what I got from it.
Right, see, I was so mired in the Fisher King, the idea of this wound that sort of doesn't heal. The only thing that can heal is, it's the Holy Grail itself, the literal cup of Christ, right? And you
it's also, I mean, what heals the Fisher King is the question, right? It depends on it depends on. So in the Parsifal,
tell me. It has been years since I have read any Arthurian stuff. So please explain it to me.
In the version of Parsifal by Wolfram von Eschenbach, the question is, why do you suffer? Right? It's so the idea is that you have to ask the right question in order to heal the Fisher King, because the Fisher King is a metaphor for the land, right? In a lot of these things, and because he's basically a representative of the kingdom, and you need to show compassion and ask him why he is suffering. And Parsifal doesn't ask him the first time because he's too polite to inquire about someone else's condition or someone else's misery that is evident, and that is going against his duty for compassion, effectively. So, or the question sometimes is, who does the Grail serve? Right? The Grail serves. The answer is the Grail serves the Grail King, implying that your duty is to the king. You are not supposed to seek the Grail, right? You are supposed to seek your duty to your liege, because your liege is the reflection of the land, and the Grail is designed to serve the king that you also serve.
Yeah. John Borman's Excalibur has that little bit, right, where Percival's
that's from
tree. Yeah, and that's from this. Yeah.
So
which, by the way, spoiler, we're totally doing Excalibur at some point next year.
Our next Nerd Legion is on Excalibur, by the way, so we could do it twice. I'm happy to do it because I will talk about these Arthurian legends. But yeah.
Don't ever look online, Monty. It will drive you crazy how many people think that film is shit. It is mega.
Dude, mega. It's great. And I had to explain at length, what that entire like Grail dream sequence is in the episode of Nerd Legion that we've already recorded that's coming out very soon. It'll be out by the time this video's out. So you guys can watch that on the same channel. But I had to explain like why that is so weird. And also to explain that the Grail isn't even necessarily the cup of Christ, because sometimes it is, but a lot of times, sometimes in Parsifal, the Wolfram von Eschenbach, it's a stone, right? It's not even a cup.
You know as well about. Have you ever read the Mabinogion, the Welsh one, the Welsh mythology, right? So obviously, love the Mabinogion, right? There's a dude in that called Bran, and he's got a cauldron.
Yes,
and you can drink from the cauldron to resurrect the dead. But if you come back from his cauldron, you kind of fucked up. You're not normal. Like you can't talk and shit. And he gives it to he gives it to the king as a gift, basically.
Yeah, so and also just in Celtic and Druidic mythology, the Cauldron of Plenty is like a huge symbol, right? It's very, very ancient in the British Isles, and so it actually makes more sense to consider the Grail the cauldron rather than the Cup of Christ. That was something that was like tacked on later as people became more Christian, right? These are pre-Christian stories for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I loved about the comic. They say it's slain is how they do it, but it's meant to be like Shlonja or something in Irish.
It was 2000 AD.
Yeah, which is the 2000 AD. They
have all the shit I'm referring to.
They have all of these bits in there. Yeah, it's fucking.
It's actually mega. But put it this way, if you're someone who likes sort of like Warhammer type shit, you would love that comic book. Yeah. It's also mega violent. It's not like American comics, but it's all like traditional myths from like the British Isles. But it's really good though. I think it's really a banger too.
Yeah, the absolute banger. So, but yeah, and again, it's just another thing that this movie is kind of got going for it. Is like, look. Like I'll agree. I will say the Arthurian stuff is probably the most heavy-handed stuff that's like tacked onto this film. I'd say a lot of the other stuff is subtle. The Arthurian stuff maybe not so much because it's like, yeah, if we get a puppy, we'll call it Arthur or Gwynny or whatever, and you go, all right, mate, yeah, I get it, and the whole thing with the womb that doesn't. Yeah. So, but whatever. I mean, like, I'm gonna allow it. I'm gonna allow it because
I also think the Arthurian stuff is pretty tenuous in this one. Like, it's a lot less. I think the ideas of that in relation to this film are a lot less refined than the PTSD or the class ones.
Remember the overarching story of like Mort Darth, and again, I don't need to tell you this, but correct me if I'm wrong with this. But the idea of the king being crowned, and that means it's going to bring like healing to the land, and everything's going to be good again. You can sort of see that he's crowned at the end. He becomes the king. He's killed some bad people in society. Are they trying to say that by what he's done by destroying his own family? Like that's his sacrifice to sort of heal society by getting rid of all these priests, pedophiles, and politicians. Is that what they're talking about? I don't know, but again, I'm going to allow it. I am going to allow that little,
I can see that.
Perhaps needless flourish. I'm going to allow that, Ben Wheatley, because you're so goddamn good. Even though, by all accounts, he's a bit of a pretentious wanker, but that's fine. You're my kind of pretentious wanker. I love you. I love your
only
films,
a pretentious wanker could make a good movie like this. So I have no
correct.
Like you have to be a pretentious wanker to be ambitious enough to do something, I think, this metaphorical and layered and symbolic.
Now, obviously, as I said, he has got what appears to be some terrible zombie comedy out at the moment. So maybe we're going to get some Ben Wheatley fans come and find this podcast because of the algorithmic magic. But if you're watching this and you go, I'll go watch that new Ben Wheatley TV series. I don't claim that. I've not watched it yet. I'm waiting for it all to be released, all the episodes, and then I will watch it because it's Ben Wheatley. I even watched Meg 2 because Ben Wheatley did it.
Was it entertaining? Honestly, the trailers made it look very entertaining.
Here's why I'm going to tell you right now. What people don't realize is, that take, it's a take everyone said, but it's just a good take. When people say Jason Statham is supposed to be the modern day action star. Yeah. Here's why I know it's true, Monty. Because what's funny is what makes modern action films not work is that somehow the fact that it's cliched, which was something we loved in the 90s and 80s, doesn't work in modern films. That makes it sort of ruins it. They're not being serious. It's not a real plot. Somehow Jason Statham, I never take it seriously. Like somehow I can get into that headspace. Like when I even pulled up the trailer right now, Monty, for Meg 2, and on the fucking actual poster it goes new Meg, old chum. That should be a
such a good line.
That makes me want to watch this film. And I even love that
the
Jason
trailers are good.
Also is one of those guys where he's like Nicolas Cage. He doesn't know any of these are bad films. He's earnestly trying his best to actually act. Bro, he probably thought Revolver was going to be like Citizen Kane or something, bro. Like,
I've said it a bunch of times down the years.
Unironically, I love this guy.
If we were more like Eastern cinema, Asian cinema, Jason Statham would be our Jackie Chan, and we would have absolute reverence for him.
I always say this: Crank is unironically a fucking straight fire.
Crank and Crank 2.
What a great idea! Yeah, what a great idea for
brilliant movies. But unfortunately, we just don't have that same reverence for like stunt people doing their own stunts and putting their body on the line. But then whenever you talk to anyone about Jackie Chan, oh my God, remember when he split his head on Armor of God? No, Project A, when he broke his collarbone and all of this. And it's like, yeah, Jason Statham's out there doing all of that. Even shit like the Transporter, that fight with the grease, where he puts the grease on the floor and he's battering everyone. It's fucking brilliant, mate. It's like actually a really good. If you saw that in like a Jet Li film, you'd be like, oh, he's fucking mega, isn't he? Yeah, right. Another absolute godhead.
I've
right?
seen like all the Once Upon a Time in China movies. Like,
Bro,
fucking
I
love Jet
remember
Li.
I was in America when like Lethal Weapon 4 came out. Went to the cinema to see it. But by the way, that film's trash. But everybody standing ovation at the end of the movie for that
Jet Li
one.
is unbelievable. Yeah.
God bless you, America. I fucking love you. So anyway, look, we can start putting a pin in it. This, as I said, I love this movie. I share it with everyone. It's my gift. This and The One-Armed Boxer are my gift to all of my friends because I know people haven't seen this movie, and it's criminal. It's so criminally underappreciated, underviewed, misunderstood.
I've never heard this film recommended ever, except for by you, by the way. Never heard anyone ever even reference it.
I had never heard of this movie ever. So,
and I will add, given the premise of the arc, I think this movie will sit with you for days after you watch it. Is it scary in the way that Gonjiam with the jump scare, or Cure with the like disturbing, off-kilter nature of the scenes? This is a different kind of disturb. Put it this way, I remember watching the round of applause at the end and the bewildered look on his face, standing above the corpses of his wife and child, and it just cutting to kill list and then it ending. And I was like, I probably could have done that ending a little bit better, actually. I'm going to go and think about that. The next day, I just had this weird vibe. You know, when you're just like, you just feel like you're just coasting through life and nothing's connected. And, Jim Morrison's fucking people are strange. You're looking at everyone like everything's a bit weird. This movie did that to my brain. And it was there for like 2 or 3 days. And I was kind of like, yeah, something's really fucked up. There's an underbelly to like even the most mundane, normal facets of society. There's like something really grimy at work. If you stare at it, it'll drive you fucking crazy, which is another aspect to this. The Lovecraftian elements are so brilliantly introduced. So I think it's that kind of scary. This is a movie that, take it as a literal reading, go to bed, don't give a fuck. That's up to you. You can do that with this film. You can enjoy it on a very surface level. But if you really open yourself to what's going on here and you really think about it and then you play it back and you watch it again, this movie gets under your skin. And it's, as I said, the violence is sprinkled in, but when it happens, it is utterly horrifying. It does not shrink away from showing you the very real consequences of violence. I mean, even the human sacrifice at the end, when she just steps off and fucking hangs herself and is just swinging there while people like, it's fucking dark, bro. Like, this is a fucking
also
really, funny. But this is what I mean as well. I think. And I said this on another episode. Isn't it weird how comedy and horror are almost like that perfect marriage? And my theory about that has always been is horror has to tap into what's going on in your psyche about what makes you afraid, okay? And to do that, it has to have its finger on the pulse of the cultural zeitgeist. The movies that are scary in the 60s don't necessarily scare you in the 2020s because that you've lost that frame of reference. It's not relevant. That thing that was a fear back then isn't a fear now, like body horror, stuff like that. But also, comedy has to have that same finger on the pulse. Dated comedy doesn't make you laugh, but also comedy has that same element of like pushing the envelope and danger. And oh my God, you can't say that. That's shocking. When you hear like a really dark joke and you go, oh, fuck me, and you're almost afraid to laugh. That's why I think these two elements marry well together, but it has to be done well. And this movie, go on. Have your dark comedy, call it that. That's fine. But it's the darkest of dark comedies. And trust me, there are scenes in it that will make you gasp in horror as well as laugh out loud. And not many films can pull off that harmony,
And as we said earlier, that hammer scene is one of the hardest scenes to watch. It's not even that it's like actually, like it is violent. It's not even that it's like the insane gore. It's just so intense. It's just so over the top. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm with you. I even thought they were actually trying to trick you of like, well, he's going to face away. It's going to be straight to the head, done, etc. Oh, it's gross in it. It's actually fucking so bad.
There was no Hitchcockian cuts in that scene.
It was
none whatsoever.
It was also, I think, an interesting contrast to Cure, where the murder is just so normalized. Like this one was like, holy shit. Right.
As I said, it's disturbing for a different reason, but the detached headshot in Cure, when the police officer just walks up behind and kills that guy, that to me is the most horrifying scene in that movie. It really is just like life is just that fucking. You know what I mean? Like, and just snuff you the fuck out, man. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like that. Don't ever just think about that. Like, how just someone just not even in your peripheral vision can just turn you off. Like, that's fucking insane. Like, don't
especially
think
somebody
about
you know who you've
Yeah,
never really
exactly.
that you
You're
work with,
just
just your
there,
colleague.
Gotta go back to the office and do all that bloody paperwork. And scene. Done. And scene. Game over. Like, that is mental. And that the way that is shot, there's no zooming in.
Yep.
There's no
It's just one shot.
cinematography. Just a flat static shot. It just tells you everything you need to know about the kind of, finality of death and the fragility of life. But it's very different to the kills in this, where the kills in this are very stylized and really graphic, because that's again what it's trying to say. That the horror of violence is indeed another thread in this movie. Violence is horrific, to whether it's state mandated, paid for. The consequences of violence are absolutely horrifying for most civilized, normal people to process.
Well, there you go. Thanks for watching. It's been fun. Hope you guys enjoyed our scary deep cuts. I know this probably was weird for many of you. We're going to move into our Sword and Sandals arc next, and we've got 3 over 3 hour movies to kick it off. By the way,
Zoomer audience gone. Zoomer clicks gone.
When you were
forever.
like, I looked it up. When you said earlier, we can't watch Lawrence of Arabia, it's too long. I just want to point out that Ben-Hur is only 5 minutes shorter than Lawrence of Arabia.
There you go.
Ben-Hur is in fact 3.5 hours long.
I will add though, there's not like a big action scene in Lawrence of Arabia like there is with the Wicked Chariot scene
What?
in Ben-Hur.
What about all the horses on the desert, man? Those shots are incredible.
Great shot. It doesn't compare to the chariot scene, mate. That gets the blood pumping. Like, that scene's aged fucking fantastically. Especially when you just know that there are just stunt people and horses just being like literally fucking, like they're just dying to get these fucking insane shots. Like Godspeed, brave people. Like,
so we will start with Ben-Hur next week, guys. So strap in. It's an all-time classic. Great movie. Worth 3.5 hours of your time. We'll see you then.